Introducing health and wellness advocate, veteran international real estate investment expert, author and speaker, Adiel Gorel.
Health tips, fitness tips, nutrition and well-being, world-class experts, all right here on my podcast, The Adiel Gorel Show. Okay, welcome everybody. It's very nice to have you on this episode. We want to talk about the great interview we had. I interviewed James Nestor. And James Nestor wrote a book called Breath. And he spent years exploring the science, art, folk background of breathing. He went to Stanford, was measured at the lab, breathing through his nose, through his mouth, went to very fascinating book, fascinating interview. I was very happy that we could interview him. He's very much in demand because his book was so wonderful. Chad, did you like that interview?
Yeah, it was fascinating for me, Adiel. And I'll tell you, one of the main reasons I was so fascinated about it, and I know we'll talk a little bit in summary of some of what was discussed, but over and over again, while you were interviewing him, all I was thinking about is, why has my doctor never said anything to me about how I breathe, or even inquired about how I breathe? You know, I've gone probably 10 times in the last 5 or 6 years to the doctor with some mystery pain or mystery illness, and they have no idea what it is. And eventually it dissolves and goes away. But I have to believe, first of all, after hearing your interview with James Nestor, I don't breathe properly. And now I'm going to be practicing how to breathe properly. But I have to believe that had I been breathing properly, many of these things that kind of, we experience and they come and go and we think, oh, it was a whatever. Maybe it could have been avoided. Maybe there's something else going on in my body that's getting worse, but I don't know it. And it's all because I'm oxygen deprived, maybe. I mean, I don't know, right? So listening to the interview that you had with James, all that was ringing in my head over and over and over again is, why is our medical system outdated? Like, why are we not talking about this? And I'm assuming that's why you wanted to interview James in the first place.
It was one of the reasons. So, let's even start logically.
Yeah.
We can survive easily, not easily, but we can survive a month with no food.
Yeah.
Most people are not going to die with a month with no food. We can survive maybe even up to 2 or 3 days without water. So, of course, we need water quite a bit. But, Chad, I think very few people would survive on more than a few minutes without breathing. Yes?
Yeah.
So, in fact, when you watch the horror movies, when the killer, the murderer kills people, he doesn't say, okay, I'm going to stop feeding you for 2 months. No. He doesn't say, oh, I'm not giving you water. No. He chokes them. So, without breathing, we die very quickly. So breathing is one of the most, if not the most, crucial thing we do all the time. We do it all the time. We never stop. We breathe and we breathe. And so wouldn't it make sense to just pay attention to, is there a way that we can do it better? Mm-hmm. And James Nestor, and we'll get into it in a couple of minutes, went to Stanford to get hooked up and measured objectively what happens when you breathe only through your mouth, which a lot of us do, or only through the nose. The results were staggering. Breathing through the nose is so much more beneficial on so many levels. Even exhaling through the nose is beneficial, because turns out when we exhale through the mouth, we lose 40% more moisture exhaling through the mouth, where through the nose, we retain the moisture. So people tend to get more dehydrated when they even just exhale through the mouth, even if they inhale through the nose. And that a lot of people walk around chronically dehydrated. Whenever somebody says, I have a headache today, or not tonight, honey, I have a headache. You may think that they may be dehydrated. So that's only just one little thing.
Mm-hmm.
James Nestor went to talk about the world. There's a whole universe that exists right in here,
Mm-hmm.
inside that. It's much bigger than we would think. We look at the nose, it doesn't seem so big, but what's inside is the size of a billiard ball. It's a big universe with an elaborate network of it. There's a world in there, and it was designed to filter, to warm, to prep the air that we put into our body, that goes into our lungs. James Nestor told us there's a relatively new thing. People got the Nobel Prize in the 90s for the discovery of the molecule called nitric oxide. Actually, it was dubbed the molecule of the year. Nitric oxide is a miraculous signaling molecule. It dilates our blood vessels. They even use it in some of the male, ED drugs. It is antiviral. It is healing. It's an amazing thing to have in our body and promote. Turns out, when we breathe in through the nose, when we inhale through the nose, we generate about 6 times more nitric oxide right in the nasal cavity than if we breathe through the mouth. But guess what happens then? The nitric oxide that we just generated by inhaling through the nose goes straight into our lungs and then dissipates in our whole body. It's a healing, critical, healthy molecule to have. So right there is a benefit. There are so many benefits. So, people talk about snoring. People talk about sleep apnea, very serious condition. It could really, turns out, just by breathing through the nose, I'm not saying it'll get rid of everybody's snoring or everybody's sleep apnea. But when James Nestor and his partner got measured at Stanford, their snoring increased by a factor of about 14 in a day or two. And they started both developing sleep apnea. When they reverted back to blocking the nose and breathing only through the, blocking the mouth rather, and breathing only through the nose, sleep apnea, which was only starting, disappeared completely. And then snoring went down by a huge factor. This is not a joke.
Yeah, no, not at all. And like you said at the beginning, because it's something we do so unconsciously all the time, it's kind of, we forget about it. It's almost, we're not even aware of it. And yet this is one of the nasal cavity, how you breathe, what you're breathing. This is some of the most basic, fundamental, and critical things for our health. Like you said, we can't stop breathing for very long before we die. That's how critical it is. And so we shouldn't assume that breath is just breath, which I think a lot of the Western medical world still unfortunately has that viewpoint. Like, it's just everyone breathes, you breathe, right? And it seems to be more in the holistic, naturopathic, and also in Eastern parts of the world where they've really spent millennia focusing on the importance of breath, the impact on breath, how to do it properly, how to do it improperly, and to avoid that. And what I was really fascinated by with some of the stuff that James was teaching us is how many people are breathing improperly. He said it's as much up to 50% of people are mouth breathers, which means no filtration. Like you just said, they're chronically dehydrated because there's no hydration. I mean, that's half our population.
Nitric oxide is lacking. So, I was very disheartened. I shared some of it with a good friend of mine who is an MD. And he said, no, I breathe through my mouth. It's much easier for me. And then he said, breath is breath. It doesn't matter. Breath is breath. Air is air, oxygen. Come on. So, that's how I believe Western medicine looks at this. Luckily, I could tell him about the Stanford studies now. Stanford, okay. If you talk about yogis doing Om, who cares? Stanford measured, now I want to listen a little more.
Yeah.
So, there is one thing that people say, and it's a good thing, but my nose is stuffed all the time, stuffed. Even if I want to breathe through the nose, I can't. So James Nestor said, the nose is a use it or lose it type of a proposition. The more you breathe through the nose, the more it opens up. And actually, there are some people who say if you actually hold your breath in a controlled way, it will open the nose even quicker. We'll talk about that in the future, actually, on another interview. But it's a use it or lose it proposition. But in the meantime, there's so many things to do. For example, I have little bottles with saline solution. I put them into my nostrils. I clear it out. Right there, it helps me quite a bit. Some people use a neti pot, nothing bad about that. Warm water, you put salt in, you let it move through the system, but you will see when you start breathing through your nose, it'll become easier. Now, of course, I've been very fortunate here because I came across a book by Patrick McEwen, who we'll interview in the future. And that book is one of his first books, an old book called Close Your Mouth. I was intrigued, and I got so convinced, and James Nestor makes the case. So I do what he does. I've been doing it for years, actually. When I go to bed at night, I put a little tape. There's a special tape for your lips that simply closes your mouth very gently. You can get rid of it with a little push of the tongue if you want to. You're not going to choke or anything, but it makes you breathe through the nose the entire night. Big effect on the quality of your sleep, big effect on your health. James Nestor put it in an interesting way. He said, think about a Charlie Chaplin mustache moved 1 inch lower. That's what he does. That's what I do. Chad, I don't think I have to ask you, but I'm sure that's what you do.
Yeah.
Of course. So I am even using another trick. I say, why not give my nose the best chance to breathe easily through the night? So I put that little thing, and then I use, the athletic tape that people use on their mouth, which just slightly, enlarge the nostril, like pull them, called breathe right, that kind of thing. I put that on at night too. So I put a little tape, breathe right, and I've been sleeping with breathing through my nose the entire night for a long time. And I absolutely wouldn't want to change.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I've been really, from the James Nestor interview, one of the things that I've been learning and practicing is also, the how to breathe. So those are little devices and stuff like that we can use. Years ago, someone taught me, a lot of people breathe in the upper chest, it's very shallow versus the deep breathing where it goes down through the diaphragm. And it's amazing when you learn how to breathe from the diaphragm, the stress, and you hold, by the way, so you breathe in deep and you hold. And I believe James, talked about that, the hypoxia therapy and things like that, right? In terms of how we actually oxygen deprive ourselves intentionally sometimes with deep breathing exercises, because it actually triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, reduces stress, and you're giving your body all that time to absorb all that oxygen. And then the CO2 is you're getting the CO2 threshold. So it's going to cause the reflex for you to breathe again. And so a lot of people don't realize that they're just breathing so shallow. It's like old air on top of new air. You're not actually cleaning out the lungs. So these are some, things I didn't even know about this until, the interview and we started talking about this.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you can make up a cute term, which I think somebody already did. It's very fashionable now to talk about intermittent fasting, right? But when you intentionally play around with holding your breath in a very controlled and easy manner, which we will have an interview with somebody else on this in the future, You can call it intermittent breathing, right?
Mm.
So, I mean, James Nestor was excited to hear that I personally, me, Adiel, had the privilege of working with one of the people he wrote about in his book, an incredible person by the name of Carl Stough,
Yeah.
Stough. His nickname was Dr. Breath. And James Nestor didn't get to interview or talk with him because Carl Stough passed around 2000. But he did talk to a lady who is one of the people who continue the work, and he did have a very good notion, but he was incredibly excited to hear that I worked with Carl Stough.
Yeah.
And working with Carl Stough was spectacular. I loved it. And the gist of it is what's important about breathing is the exhale. That's it, the exhale. The inhale is just a reflex. And we already said it's triggered by CO2 thresholds, not really by lack of air, by CO2 thresholds. So Carl Staugh's work involved, usually you lay on your back on a table. He makes room in your chest for your diaphragm to smoothly go up and down. And you basically, emit a sound like maybe you count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. When you start running out of air, you continue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, until you exhaled everything. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to work. The inhale will come automatically, obviously. And leaving a session with Carl Stough, my face was rosy. I felt warm, energetic, happy. I was a happier person. It was miraculous work. So Carl Stough wanted me, when I landed from a transatlantic flight, he said, for hours, you've been breathing very stale air. Do the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, expunge, exhale everything, all the filth from your lungs, letting new air come in. That's what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Now, Carl Stough worked with the Met opera singers. He helped, emphysema patients that science thought cannot be helped. They were helped. And he worked with the US Olympic 1968 track team who competed in Mexico City at high altitude. And they set some of the best records in the running disciplines. They worked with him. Unbelievable stuff. Not much of it left to see. You can look up on the web, see a little bit. Unbelievable. So that is, again, the exhale is important. CO2 levels are the trigger for us to take an in-breath.
Yeah, no, that it's super interesting for me to think about that, because we take again for granted this whole idea of breathing, not realizing that there's old stale air that we're not getting out of our body. So in essence, for everyone listening, a way to think about this is people are, unless they're breathing correctly, in chronic oxygen deprivation. And when you are depriving your cells of the full richness of the amount of oxygen, if you had, full oxygen in your lungs, imagine, like you just said, Adiel, how you felt happier, you felt more alive when you were working with Carl Stough and his techniques, because you had full oxygen, right? It reminds me, and it's also a nitric oxide conversation as well. My old therapist, chiropractically trained, but he did all kinds of different bizarre techniques. I won't even get into what it is. I mean, my chiropractic sessions with him were 45 to 50 minutes, not 2 minutes, because he and another guy would put me on a table, get in there and twist me in all these different directions and tell me to breathe while I'm twisted. My diaphragm is twisted. And they explained to me two things are happening. We're moving around the organs to create more space. You're breathing deeply, fully exhaling and inhaling, but also the manipulation of the joints and the tendons and all of the things that they were doing with the way they were twisting me, they said was releasing nitric oxide. And they warned me. They said, when you leave, you're probably going to feel high, like dizzy, because all the oxygen plus the nitric oxide. And they were right. Every time I leave, after a session with them, I feel like I'm like the expression, I'm on cloud nine. Like what happened there, right?
Well, we had an interview which will air with Anat Baniel, a great in the world of neuro. We used to call it Feldenkrais. I'm a teacher and I'm her student. She's an amazing, there's so much to learn. I actually connected between her and James Nestor because she developed a whole segment of how to move the body in a way that enables breathing better. But the diaphragm can be made to move better. Once again, that was a notion that Carl Stough encountered in resistance. But listen to what you just said. You opened the door to the next subject that he talked about. You said, a lot of people just breathe shallow, just here. We want to breathe deep into our belly. We want to breathe, Well, turns out, apparently, according to James Nestor, the ideal general pace at which to breathe is 5.5 second cycle, 5.5 seconds. So that actually makes for 5.5 seconds for inhale, 5.5 seconds for exhale, and really 5.5 total breaths per minute. That'll slow down your breathing. That'll release a lot of stress, make you calm down. Blood pressure goes down. So it's not like you have to go around all day with a stopwatch and try to breathe slowly.
Yeah.
But eventually, when you think about breathing fully, filling out your air, I remember I went to a workshop once. It was a Tantra workshop, but he liked us to breathe in a way that we fill everything up, and then we hold the breath for a few seconds, and then we let it go. I remember enjoying the Tantra workshop a lot. So you can say, of course you did. It's Tantra. Why wouldn't you enjoy it? But one thing I did enjoy was I felt twice as funny and humorous as I normally do. And it seems like everybody, the banter, and then I realized we were breathing fully. We were more engaged. Humor comes from a place where if you're in a better place, your humor is better. And that was interesting. It wasn't so much the Tantra, it was the breathing.
Yeah. And something else that I thought was interesting in your interview with James as well was when you guys were talking about the importance of chewing as it pertains to breathing and also nitric oxide release. Again, a thing we do every day when we eat. We don't, or chew gum. Some people do it, but who knew? I didn't, that there is a role in the chewing in the jaw. That's all part of this network. Like you said, there's a whole universe inside of our nasal cavity here, and the impact that chewing has on that. So, I mean, I guess the message is we should all be chewing gum and things like that or something.
Okay, so James Nestor really got into it. He realized that the very act of chewing is critical in strengthening all the structure, in opening the cavities and enabling us to breathe better. Apparently, in the last few 100 years, our food has been getting softer. In the last 10 or 20 or 30 years, people say, oh yeah, I just had my morning shake. Talk about soft, yeah? You didn't exactly chew a whole lot. Just like they say, the wise men, right? Few men chew. Yeah. So, I mean, so we don't chew as much. James Nestor went very deep into this. And he went to Europe. And of course, in Paris, under the city, there are the famous catacombs. The catacombs is where tens of thousands of skulls and bones are there from many periods back in history. It turns out there's even a tourist tour of the catacombs. So he took the tour, and his aim was to look at the skulls. And of course, measurements have shown that back in a few thousand years ago, we had a bigger jaw, bigger cavity. Everything was much easier for nose breathing. Today, we get smaller. He talked about kids not having enough room in their mouth for our teeth.
Yeah.
You need to take out teeth. So, what he came to the conclusion that we need to do is chew.
Yeah.
And so he saved us some time.
Yeah.
He tried all kinds of gum, because, the first thing you think about is gum. Yeah, but what gum? So, of course, it needs to be sugarless. Of course. So he's done the research. He recommended a couple of gums. I tried one of them, and when I remember, because very sadly, I'm a lazy person who does not remember. But when I remember, I chew this gum. So the brand, I'm trying to see if I have anything here. No, I don't. But
it'll be in the show notes, though.
It'll be in the show notes.
Yeah.
Phalim. So it's F as in Frank, A, L as in Larry, I, M as in Mary. Phalim. It's from Turkey. Sugarless. They have a sugarless version, and it's just the consistency is thick enough for you to get some good chewing action, and yet not too thick to really. So, chewing is important. And, people say, I can't believe you can do this and chew gum at the same time. Well, I'm trying to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, before we break with our episode here, you've got something coming up that I want to alert everybody to. You have a fabulous interview coming up with Dr. John Sottery. Tell us a little bit about who this man is and why our audience should tune in.
John Sottery, Dr. Sottery became a friend. I invited him to be one of the experts who participated in our the public television show called Life 201. We wrote a book called Life 201 where each one of the experts put a chapter, and he put his chapter. John Sottery is one of these people who never stops reading and following the worldwide research. And he's very well equipped to absorb it, but he also has the personality, the patience, much more than I do. So he's always full of good new information. He talks about supplementation. One of the things that he said that struck me right away is some of us take a multivitamin and we think we are covered as far one of the most boring vitamins, we think vitamin E. Well, it turns out vitamin E is a whole family of vitamins, and most supplements use the cheapest version to save money. And those are actually harmful potentially. So he told us which is the right one to use. And he says it in the interview, and it'll be in the show notes. Then he talked about one of the elements. My nutritionist shared this with me 35 years ago. Magnesium, involved in 300 processes in our body, critical importance. Most people in the US are chronically short in magnesium. He talks about this. Vitamin K, what kind, how to take it, and many other things we can learn from John. We talked to him about sauna and detoxing. We talked to him about so many other useful, beautiful, and to the point, simple stuff we can do to. Now, John is about 62 years old. You look at him, he has some pictures with no shirt on, running on the beach. My goodness, the guy has the body of a 20-year-old. It's ridiculous. Yeah. So he says, I want to be my own patient zero. I want to be the example. I want to do it all myself. And my God, the guy looks amazing. Yeah. So that will be so fulfilling. We can get tips, specific tips, sometimes so simple about even the vitamins we may want to change. So that's a great interview.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. And for myself, as someone who's a very avid supplementer, and for those watching and listening, you've probably read about it, right? I mean, that Time magazine years ago wrote a whole thing about how our food system, because of over farming and all of this kind of stuff, we're just leaching the nutrients out of our food. It's not as nutritious as it used to be. Okay, so we can supplement, but as many of you probably know, it's an unregulated industry. Supplement industry. And unless you know what you're looking for and you know which brands are actually doing the quality work in order to actually produce good supplements versus with fillers and all of this kind of stuff, you have no clue. You go look at the shelves in the store and what's this vitamin C versus that vitamin C versus that vitamin C or E or magnesium or any of the things. So I'm excited to hear this interview when you guys, get into it. And for those listening, if you are someone who does supplement, or you're someone who's thinking you maybe should, or maybe you're just thinking for the first time, maybe I should supplement, maybe my diet isn't good, you don't want to miss this interview. It's going to be very enlightening for you. Well, Adiel, any parting words before we break for this week?
Once again, it's really such a joy. I myself, from a total selfish viewpoint, am learning all these incredible tips I'm implementing in my life, making my life better. I know it's affecting you too. And I'm just very gratified that it has a great effect on you too, on the viewers.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and don't miss Adiel's next interview with John Sottery. Until then, have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. For more helpful videos like this, join my free community at adielgorel.com or click the link below.